and myself, and a very, very special guest and good friend of mine today is Mark, aka Garlic Suitor. Mark, Mark and I have been sort of living parallel lives for a while. We both teach game design and both also got involved in VR in the classroom with Foundry 10, probably at the same time at the beginning of their program, and just continued to be like doing the same cool stuff. Mark often cooler than me. His high school kid took off with Unity and some neat stuff like creating simulations and things. And these are all life goals for me and my students, which is why I'm excited to have Mark on. I hope that a few of my students jump in today, because this is one of those sessions that's, like all of them, but so geared toward what my goals are with my kids. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Mr. Mark Suitor.
Thank you, Steve. And no, I don't think what I'm doing is cooler than what you're doing, because I follow you closely. So my name is Mark Suitor, and I teach high school game design, computer programming, some of the Microsoft stuff, which is college credit. And over the past 5 years or so, I've been tinkering around with Unity, which is, if you're not familiar, one of the world's leading platforms for making games. So games you play on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, mobile devices, about half or so are made in Unity. If it's VR, then over half are made in Unity. So I'm going to be showing just some examples of things and how to build some basic things in Unity. But I want to kind of give a little bit of background to what people are using Unity to build VR applications and how my students are using it. So I know there's some teachers and students and all kinds of things here. So you can get the slides here that has some various links in it at that bit.ly link. And I teach at Elida High School. And like everybody else right now, we are working from home. And so some of my students are still able to use Unity as we go. So there's me, and those are the courses I teach, multimedia, I forgot. And that's in Hershey, Pennsylvania. So this is my daughter in my classroom playing with Tilt Brush. And one thing I love about VR is that immersion. And I don't think it's too bad of a thing to have young kids in VR, as long as they're not in there for more than 5 minutes at a time at that young of age, because the headsets are still kind of heavy. And my big thing is this learning triad. Because when you start jumping into something like Unity, which you saw, and if you're brand new to Unity, this looks like a lot of stuff. There's all these windows, and then you start jumping into like scripts, and it just looks super complicated. And so it's easy to get caught up in the content and trying to drill down all these different almost memorization things and just straight video tutorials. But what I tell my students when they ask me questions like, well, how do I do blank? My answer is usually, well, what have you tried? Have you looked in the forums? Have you looked on YouTube? And basically teaching them the skills to teach themselves, because which really comes into play now when everybody's working from home, right? I can't just stand over them and be like, oh, click this, do this. And of these three, the most important is will. In other words, their motivation to keep learning these things. So if anything you get out of this, if you want to start playing around with Unity and such, is don't bury yourself trying to make something epic. Start super simple and keep the love of learning going. Because as soon as you get overwhelmed by it, it's over, because you don't have any motivation to keep learning it. It just feels like too much. And so that's why I focus on this initially. And by the way, I stole that learning triad from one paragraph out of this book, which is a great book anyway. So there's the most important is will. And just as a case in point, my daughter loves programming, which, by the way, the syntax on the cake is wrong. It should be happy and then /happy there, but I didn't make the icing. My wife did that. She's not HTML. Anyways, my fear is now that she's in school that she's going to start learning that content is king and that skill and will start to erode. And so whether you're a student or a teacher, the most important thing is going to be will. If they learn just a little bit of content, but they love learning it, they're going to keep learning more than if you force it down their throat. And furthermore, the trust in the classroom is what's going to establish that. You've probably noticed a lot of classrooms that are the teacher is constantly putting out fires. Go sit down, go do this, go do that. But trusting them to make good decisions and letting them make mistakes needs to come first. So that out of the way. So where's VR being used in an industry? Why would you even start using Unity to build VR things? This is from like a year and a half ago now, but Walmart sent out Oculus Go's to all of their supercenters to train employees how to use this thing, which you may have seen now. I've seen them around our Walmarts near us. It's like the pickup station. So they have like these lockers on the side, but the employee goes and they beep a package and then they go get the package out of looks like a locker room facility. But that's how they were training their employees. And VR training has been taking off. Gaming people hear about and know about, but what they don't see is the industry use of training. So this isn't one that we built, and I'm sure the broadcasting of a video through streaming video is not excellent. So I'm not going to show a whole lot here, but what I want to show is this is somebody learning how to disassemble. I don't know. I'm going to call it a electrical panel, even though I'm not really sure what it is. But you can see that when they get close to it with the controller, it kind of lights up, and they're disassembling it. And then at the end, they start putting the pieces back in. And so here, I'll pause it. You can see they're putting this pipe right there, and you see the outline there. And in games, you see this a lot where you're indicating to the user, hey, you should probably put something here. And look, it kind of looks like this. And this basically tells the brain, that's where it goes. And the early research has shown that doing it in VR translates much better than if you watch a video on how to assemble it, right? We've all shown or watched a video ourselves, like when I try to fix my car and I watch something on YouTube, and it's like, oh, you open up the hood and then you do this and this and this and this. And I watch the whole video and then I go to do it in the car and I'm like, I have no idea. I got to go watch the video again. And this is another one, but just with a little bit of gamification. So that's the company that makes it. But companies are paying big money to make these VR simulations. And the one thing I want to point out in this one is you see the thing snap into place and there they go to pick up a bolt. And when you put it in the wrong place, it goes red. So again, just a visual feedback. And then he puts it in the correct one and it lights up and then he gets points or whatever. And finally, if you've ever heard of Lockheed Martin, they are a company that makes helicopters and battleships and like huge machinery. This is a video I took at AR VR World in London last June. One of their tech guys was showing this demo of how they mock up training stations. Or this is like a workstation on a battleship, I think they said. And so this is just a reachability test. Can you reach everything? But clearly they're using the Vive and they're using these little reactive buttons here. And that's interesting because those are the things that my students and I are building. And so all of this just to say that the industry is way ahead of the game. They are aware of the transferability of skills. I'm not going to show this one, but it's they're training firefighters in England using VR. And then this company in Paris is using VR. But what I thought was cool and what I wanted to show here is their small team of developers. I have no idea what any of this says. First of all, it's in French. But second of all, I don't understand it. But it's messy. And I love that it's messy because it makes me feel like, hey, my classroom feels really messy. And it feels like okay, we're kind of making this up as we go, but turns out even the best developers in the world kind of have that approach of the cliche is kind of building the plane as you fly it. Um, but really, I guess a better analogy would be is we're trying to build some sort of parachute after we've jumped out of the plane because of deadlines and such. And they and they even duct tape things together, which again, they were capturing the face of some actors for some HoloLens stuff. And they're playing around in Unity. This is at that same company, and they're trying different resolutions of models to see the performance effects and etc. So this looks like a lot, and I know it is, but the case in point is that companies around the world are using this, and they are using it to train people. So this is a course on Unity Learn. Learn is their new platform they just launched this year ago, pretty recent. And I made a VR course for beginners here where you learn how to build a simulation of jump starting a car battery. So if you're brand new, there's actually zero coding in this course. And I did that on purpose because I didn't want it to be about writing scripts. I wanted it to be about building things.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Can I just ask? This is awesome. Is we got to get the link out there somewhere. What is the? I'll do a quick search for it, but it's VR.
It's at the end of this slideshow, I think.
Oh, it is. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, if you have the Bitly, I think you'll get all of it.
Awesome.
So, you're probably familiar with design thinking, so I'll spend very little on here, but this is what I show my students and the prototype part of design thinking. So this is in my classroom, and I task my intro to programming students with building a final project. They don't have to do VR. VR is an option to them. I believe in choice. I know Steve is a big proponent, I was going to say component, but I guess that too, of choice-based learning. And so a lot of them do elect to do VR because it just feels cool, I guess. And these ladies wanted to make a training simulation of how to change your car oil. And so this is the oil, what holds the oil. And then this little bolt we jammed into that box is the bolt that you would pull out to change the oil. And they made it so you actually have to lay on the ground underneath the car model to change the oil. Now, what's interesting is they didn't get finished, and it was not punished, because I'm also a big believer in, like I said, the trust-based classroom, where I tell them, look, I don't care if you don't finish your final project. Pick something challenging that is going to push you to the limit of what you can do, and then a step further. And I won't punish you if you don't get done. In fact, you're more likely to get punished if you do get done. And that really throws them for a loop, because they're thinking, no, whoa, wait a minute. My go-to strategy to get my A in the class is pick something easy so I can get it done, right? Well, that kind of flips the model on them a little bit, because then they're like, oh, well, then I can do the thing I really want to do. And it doesn't matter if I get done. I tell them, you're graded from bell to bell every day. That's your final project grade, not whether or not you got done. And I've gotten better work. They work harder. They come in outside of class to do it, because that strikes out the focus on content in the grade and puts all the focus on will. That learning triad I mentioned earlier, all the focus is on that. And it's really paying dividends. These guys are making this is what inspired my tutorial, actually, is they made a prototype of, we call everything prototypes because we never get done with anything. Jumpstart your car battery. And we do paper prototyping, which, by the way, came from, if you know Jesse Schell, Schell, of Shell Games out of Pittsburgh area. They've made a lot of good games. Not Keep Talking, no, I Expect You to Die in Steam. It's a puzzle game, escape room game. Anyways, his book on game design talks about the importance of paper prototyping, especially for VR, because you can feel out all the things that are working and not working. And this is what their final project looked like. They made the batteries in SketchUp. Hanging out back here are these the jumper cables. And again, they didn't get finished. but they learn so much along the way, and they write some basic scripts of determining if the right jumper cable is on the right um, terminal on the batteries. Um, and yes, I have couches in my room. But this student brought in a very expensive machine that fuses together fiber optic cables, and he said, it's dangerous to train new people on this machine because it's very not fragile, but it's expensive. And so I wish we could train people without having to use this machine. And then when they use the machine, they're already very familiar with it. So he built a prototype of fusing together fiber optic cables and the steps involved of using this little machine, which is magic to me that it even works. And just a few years ago, to even just have your controllers react to things like, oh, I want to pick up this box, you had to write a ton of code. And this Sean Lee guy was a guy we went to, and it would take us an entire semester to be able to just pick up a box. And I had like one student that ever was successfully able to do that. And I thought, man, VR development is hard. And then I stumbled into VRTK, which is not its own software. It is simply, I'll call it a plugin for Unity. It stands for Virtual Reality Tool Kit. And it comes with this farm scene, and you can go like pick the apples in VR and do various things. But it speeds up the development process. I began using it in version 3. On Udemy, I created a course which has like 10,000 students in it or so now, but this is the old version. So a lot of developers are still using the old version, where we made a cornhole game. So you can still use that, but it's a lot different than using version 4. So I would recommend just starting with version 4, but just be aware that a lot of developers are still using version 3. And then Unity kind of found that and said, hey, a lot of people are interested in this. So I started doing things for them. And there's that course again. And what it looks like when you take that beginner's guide is you sign up for a free account, and then as you complete steps, it keeps track of that so you can pick up where you left off. And here's a quick example of what that course entails. So you see this sphere around this controller, that is a snap zone. And so this is a demo area, but when you pick up one of the cables, which was made by one of my high school students, by the way, that model he made in Blender, when you put it close enough, in other words, inside the sphere, it will light up. It means you're close enough, which you can shrink that all you want. And if I jump ahead here so that you can actually see what's going on, and there's another snap zone, you can change the color and where it's at, and things like that. And then I test it in VR, and I completely go to the wrong slide, which is all by design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There we go. So this is what it looks like in VR. And then we'll see when you get close enough, it lights up. And when you let go within the zone, it snaps into position. Now, it's huge and in the wrong position, but we fix that in the next video. But you can see my awesome SketchUp work here. The car I got from the asset store. In fact, this is the student that made those jumper cables. This was his final project. He made how to change a car tire. So you have to take all the nuts off and then change the tire and then use a tool to put them back on in kind of that star pattern that you're supposed to do when you change your car tire. And you can actually download his project there if you want to play around with it. So for the teachers, why did I go this direction with my programming course? Because this is what I used to do. Python, then a bunch of C#, and then the final projects, which was great. And they probably got more exposure to, they at least got 2 languages there, but I never saw as much will. And so that bothered me, which is why I started doing this. This is my current programming course. So we do what's called Create with Code, which, by the way, they started yesterday doing a daily live Zoom meeting. They had almost 2,000 people join yesterday. If you look on the Unity, just look up Unity Learn. It's Create with Code Live. And so every day for the next, I don't know, like 8 weeks or something, they're going to take a chunk of that. It's kind of a follow along thing, which is really cool. Next week, I'll be co-hosting some of those, which I'm kind of nervous about. And then there's a beginning scripting course where you learn all about variables and all those basics. And then we actually go through my VR course, and then they can create their VR apps. And again, they don't have to create VR apps. It's just an option. They can make 2D games too. And then for students and teachers or parents, even if you're thinking, okay, so if I get this VR headset, what else can I do with this? Because it's going to, feel underutilized if you're just using it to build VR apps in the classroom or at home. And so I found some other interesting uses of it. And this is my art teacher. I hope she doesn't mind I use this. I think I asked her. But this is using a program called Masterpiece VR. And you can see she's kind of carving material away. It's kind of like Tilt Brush, except you are modeling with this clay-like material. And what's cool is that you can then export that and 3D print it. And so she made this mug and 3D printed it. And so we thought, how could we involve students with this? We were just kind of screwing around with things. And so we thought, let's have a 3D printed student art show or something like that. And so we had they paired up in her ceramics class, and they made a model in clay, and then their partner had to look at the clay and try to build it in VR. So some are accurate, some not so much, but it didn't really matter because it was really fun just having students build things in VR and then 3D print them. This is my son Lincoln at my house. So even young ones, I gave him about 10 minutes on there, and he built this. This is his house. As you can clearly tell, that's the roof, and there's a chair in there. And it was just cool because now that we're at home, we're doing our art activities is building in VR. And if you want to know how to do that, I made a quick tutorial in my classroom one day on how do you export it, get it to the 3D printer, etc. So this is a live video I'm not going to watch right now, but very cool. Masterpiece VR is like $20 or something on Steam. And the 3D printer we use is the FlashForge Finder, and it's like $300, I think, which is pretty good for the quality of print that you get out of it. Another fun VR thing you can do with your headset is virtual public speaking, which you may have seen before. There's a lot of free ones. And so this is one of my students practicing a speech, and that's her PowerPoint on the laptop in front of her. And it's also behind her on the virtual screen, I should say. And what's fun is that I have the option, I call them buffer points in my one Microsoft class for PowerPoint. I say, if you practice your PowerPoint in VR, I will give you 10 buffer points. So when you go to do your real presentation, and let's say you mess up and you get like a 95 out of 100, those 10 buffer points take you up to 100. It can't take you over 100, like 105, but they're buffer 10 points. So, which is pretty cool because it encourages them to without forcing them to. And I would say about 90% of the ones that do that report that they feel so much more comfortable after practicing it, doing it in real life. Again, there's transferability. It doesn't have to be photorealistic. It has to be close enough. And quickly, SketchUp. Tinkercad is another cool one, but you can take models from SketchUp and literally just import them as SketchUp models. You don't even have to export them. You can bring the SketchUp model itself right into Unity, which is cool because then you can take your SketchUp models that you made and just throw them around in VR or use them in whatever game you're making.
Hey, Mark.
And finally, yeah.
I have a question on that then. With the SketchUp stuff, if you bring in something that you've already added texture to in SketchUp, will that come with it? And if so, or if not, is it just as easy to add textures to models like this that you bring in?
Yes. So what I usually do is bring them in grayscale and then add the textures in Unity. There is a way to do it natively, but I I don't know how to do it. I know you can, but
Yeah, because I find the same challenge in a weird way with AR. Like when I do something that's
oh
textured and then try to export it and bring it into AR, it so often loses the textures. I don't quite
yeah,
get
there's
how
like
that
certain
translates.
formats, and even within those formats, there's certain options. And I just found, like you said, it's sometimes easier to just slap them on after you get
Mhm.
to your destination program.
Right. Cool.
Um, so this guy right here, Dale Newcomb, we did a little Skype like session with him. He's not even a game developer, but what's cool is that he used VR. This is where I learned about VRTK. He made this Beach Bowling Dream VR game, and it's literally just throwing this cannonball at these bottles. And he said within about a month or two, he learned Unity and VRTK, made this game and threw it on Steam for like, I don't know, $2 or something. And I thought, isn't it incredible? What a great time to be alive that like I could teach my students in one semester how to build something in VR that they could then put on Steam for sale. Now, of
Yeah.
course, legally they'd have to build it at home and then do it. They couldn't put what they built at school on Steam, but the point still remains. And I found out a couple weeks ago that it is $99 to submit your game to Steam, and that includes feedback cycles. So if you submit it and they're like, "Nope, sorry, you forgot your like promo video," they'll send it back to you and tell you to add A, B, and C, and you can resubmit it and not have to pay an additional fee. So that
See,
$99 covers that.
yeah, and one of the things, and this I know we share so much in terms of education, is one of the reasons I got so excited about working with students with XR, VR and AR, is that it's like such an emerging technology, and so much of the content out there so far is still bad because everybody's just hacking around trying to figure it out. And
Yeah.
if we provide these opportunities for our students to get in to a new technology at this early phase,
Yep.
I mean, your kids coming out with these skills, I mean, talk about marketable, CTE, not to mention the fact that it's so exciting and, for them
Yeah.
to, the first time I have kids just creating very simple stuff in VR, and the first time they get the headset on and actually see their work virtually and move around in that space is like,
Yeah.
it just opens up that idea of like what's possible here. And
Yep.
that's tremendous to me.
And we use the word, it's funny because we use the word engaging a lot as like a buzzword, like
Right.
it sounds great in a slide deck and in a keynote and stuff like that. And this idea of agency, this is agency like in action. This is kids having a meaningful impact, not just on their learning, but in the idea that kids can now go and like upload their game if they have the means, and now they're like, we see all these once a year you inevitably see a news article of some kid, some 6-year-old, 10-year-old who's made a video game, and it's all over the news. Any kid can do this just about, and learn this in Mark's class, and then go and if the game is entertaining, like, I mean, there's literally people who have made $1 million on a bottle flipper game, right? I mean, anything is possible at this point. We do live in the coolest time, like, to date, for the opportunity for students to have like real agency in their learning, and use that agency in a meaningful way. There's never been a time like this. It's
Right.
it's freaking great. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
And I think when we talk about that word engaging, like I kind of hate that word in education because I think if it's meaningful, I mean, I want my kids engaged in meaningful activities. If you were to let your kids play Minecraft for 40 minutes in class, they will be engaged, absolutely. But that kind of dilutes the word terribly.
Yeah.
100%.
I want them hungry.
Yes.
I want them begging, like, okay, I get it. I want to learn the next thing so I can make my project better.
Right. Exactly.
Right. It's the difference is that when they're told, if you do this well, you can put your game on Steam, their eyes just go
We're like, what?
Right. And then, and another thing with that too is like you say, Mark, about the like I want to learn the next thing. Like everybody's project and game is going to be so different that you or I couldn't possibly teach them all the skills they would need for that.
Mhm.
So that's where that idea of motivation to truly learn what you want to learn because you want to implement it. That's when learning is meaningful. And kids blow me away. You probably have the same experience, but so often it's like they ask me a question. I'm like, I'll sit down with you and try to figure it out. But
Like, I don't know.
Right.
And how powerful are those 3 words? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard sometimes as a teacher to admit you don't know, because it feels like a weakness. But we expect the students for some reason to say the same thing.
Right.
Like, well, if you have a question, just ask. Well, that's them admitting they don't know, and that can feel embarrassing.
Yeah.
So we have to model that.
100%.
I was just thinking while you were chatting, I don't know, can you see this? This is a 3D printed drawing that a friend of mine who came over this week did. It's a rose that she built or drew in that Masterpiece VR, and then I just 3D
Amazing.
printed it. Anyways, thought that was neat. And along the same lines of building things to put out there, because we had a portfolio of students like the stuff I had already shown, I started asking my students, hey, do any of your parents work at like local factories where they like assemble things? Because I'm thinking of the demo videos I showed you earlier. And I made some connections just by asking my students with our local Ford engine plant. They build F-150 engines. And before our work from home thing, we had a call with them, and they had committed to us sending their 3D CAD models and et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, we're going to build a VR training simulation for their assembly line, because when the engine changes a little bit, they have to retrain everybody, and it takes time because you have to slow down the assembly line, which costs them a lot of money, not just the hourly wage of training, but the slowing down of that. So unfortunately, that's on hold right now. But the cool thing is that industry recognizes, hey, this could really work out. So there's lots of opportunity you can have once you start going down this path. It's wide open. So
Yeah, we had a similar experience last year with Zennial Digital is a company that makes VR educational content, and they were seeking out students to work with their developers directly. And it was just so cool to have kids having Zoom calls with the developers, talking about things. The developers gave kids access to the code in Unity, and then the kids were doing a variety of things between research. They were working on a bat simulation, and
that?
So bat BAT, like bats. We were learning about bats, and they bats. And they were so the kids. We had like a group of 8th graders from one school doing a lot of the research. Then my high school kids were prototyping and considering what they could do to enhance the experience with the code, and then doing some of it. I mean, amazing when we get those real world opportunities for our kids.
Yeah. And there's the will to learn. Here's some links. There is the course that I made, the beginner's guide on the Unity Learn. And I kind of skipped over it, but I'll show just what this last piece is. If you're not ready for Unity and it's too much, there's a nice program called Ready, which is more, I would say it's akin to Scratch, but it's made specifically for making video games. And there are some tutorials on the Unity website. Space Chicken is one, which I made for them. So you build a Space Chicken simulator, and this is what the code looks like if you're not ready for like text-based scripting. So when this and this, do that. So anyways, another resource there. Now let's jump into Unity. Oh my goodness. So many things in Unity, right? So when you first open Unity, you start out with just a completely blank scene. And what you're seeing here, if I kind of zoom out here, is this farm scene that came with VRTK, which in the course on the Unity Learn site, you literally download a Unity project and you start out with this farm scene. You don't have to build anything. It's a whole project. You just download it and open it. And so the first time you open it, obviously these are things I built. But when I play it, you don't have to have VR to be able to test a VR app. Now, currently with my students, I'm making 2D games, not just VR games. While this launches my Steam VR. I have my VR headset hooked up here, but I'm going to click on Simulated Camera Rig, because this is what my students typically experience, because we only have, well, now we have 3 VR setups, but for a while we only had 1. And so they're like, well, how do I test my VR app? Well, I'm using my mouse and my WASD to kind of drive around. And then with my right mouse button, I can use my hand to pick up things. And this is a little demo project that I started putting together, and I'll show you a couple ways to build these things just so you can see how quick you can do it. But you can see when I get it close to this little area, that chair lights up. That's one of those snap zones. And when I let go, it goes to a certain place and scale. These fireworks start shooting off like you did something climactic, which is all tied into when you drop it into the snap zone, it triggers a script to run. Pretty cool. This little chair one right there does not scale it so much. It just kind of puts it into position. You remember from the Lockheed Martin example where the guy was kind of pushing buttons. What I thought was interesting is, I'm positive, not completely, but these buttons came with VRTK, and you can see it pushes the garage door open. And it's strikingly similar to what Lockheed Martin's button looked like, and even the light up of that button. And I thought, I wonder if they're using VRTK to build their entire setups, because it's likely they are, but not guaranteed. And so I made a little button too, that when you click on it, it spawns a ball, which you could make an entire Rube Goldberg machine of these things going all over and doing crazy things. But and if I go to let me hit stop here because I don't know if it'll switch back. If I play it again, and this time actually use my HTC Vive headset, which is what I encourage my students to use, is just bring it over to the teacher computer. I'm just going to turn on one controller and hold it up to my face so I can kind of see. I can pick up things and do the whole snap zone. What's interesting is that you can then set those snap zones to only accept certain objects, which would come into play. Like, you remember the electrical panel box the guy was building in VR. You don't want them to be able to put in the wrong piece in the wrong place. So you can set validity so it only allows certain objects in and things like that. And while we're here, I'm actually going to open up a second project because I want to show that Unity is not just for VR. So if you want to build these things, you can build 2D games just as well. Not everything has to be VR, because VR feels like a big animal to tackle right at first, which, interestingly, what I'm opening here looks much simpler, but actually has a lot of scripts involved. And this is what I've been working on with my game design students. So we're making a game called Dodge Puck, which currently looks like a hot mess. But we were learning how to keep our player within the boundaries, and then it spawns all these pucks and they bounce off the walls. And so we wrote the scripts for those. They look like, get this out of the way. They look like that. So it actually is more, I shouldn't say more complicated. This version of the 2D game is more complicated. And I'm starting a series because I have to make it for my game design students anyways. I'm starting a series of tutorials on how to build this exact game that I'm going to be posting on my Twitter. It's a YouTube channel. So I wanted to show that because that's one thing. If you want to get started scripting, that's a good route to go. Or the Create with Code course that I showed earlier. So how do you build these things and how long does it take to build these things? So I made this little table here. And so you see we have our hierarchy. These are all the things in our scene. So my fun zone, that's all of those things. There's the cube. There's the custom material. Whoa. Let me drive forward instead of zooming. Etc. And inside of there, down in my project window, in packages, it comes with, once you open up VRTK, it comes with all these prefabs. Prefabs is just short for the word prefabricated. In other words, something that's already been assembled with all its parts and scripts and anything, materials. And so it comes with these things. And inside of there is a folder called Interactables. And so there is, if I expand this out and go to list view, because I can't read those. These little blue boxes mean that they are prefabs. And this one's called Interactable Primary Grab Secondary Swap. Well, what does that mean? It means, I just drag one into the scene here, which is absolutely huge. It means if I grab it with my hand, it's going to grab it. And if I try to steal it with my other hand, it's going to swap hands. Whereas if I drug in this one, my second hand, when I try to pull it out of my left hand, it's going to scale it like you pinch and zoom to a phone. So I drug in this one, and there it is in my hierarchy, and I can change the scale. I'm just going to make it like 0.1, 0.1, and let's just put it there-ish, right? I did nothing except drag in a prefab, and now if I hit play, I've already created an interactable object. Remember I showed you back in 2017 all the scripts you had to write to, let me go to simulated, all the scripts you had to write to add any kind of interactability to it. Well, if I'm not too far from it, I'm too tall. There we go. There, I can actually pick it up, go somewhere, throw it, whatever. And that was simply by dragging in one prefab. It has physics applied to it. I mean, you can adjust all those things, the mass, etc. But just like that, we have one interactable object. And then we can take it further and say, well, obviously I don't want it to look like a cube. I want it to look like, I don't know, a chair or something. And so that's where you could bring in models from SketchUp, which, by the way, this chair right here is a model I did make in SketchUp and just brought it in. And so if I want this little interactable cube, I'm going to call this Cube 2. And I like to keep it organized, so I'm going to put it in my Fun Zone folder. Inside of there, see all these things? Lots of things inside of there. The mesh is the sprite, what it looks like, the 3D model. So if I expand that and click on default mesh, sure enough, it's using a cube as the mesh. Well, I can click on this little target here, and here's a whole bunch of other things that are in my scene that I can make it look like. And hey, look, there's a chair. So let me double click that, and look. Whoa. There it is. Now it looks like a little chair. Now I could hit play and I could pick up the little chair. And so very quickly we can start to prototype a scene that is fairly useful in a way. And then I'll show the snap zone, and then I'm going to take some questions because I'm sure there's a lot of interesting things. Here inside of the packages, interactable snap zone. There again is my prefab. Just throw that into the scene. Currently, as you can see, sorry, I'm right by a building, so it keeps clipping through there. There's your sphere, which is how big the snap zone is. Let me put this right above cube 2. So the activation area, I can mess with the radius here. That's how close you have to be before it lights up. So let's say we set it about to that. And that is what it's going to look like, which we can change the highlight to look more like something else. But for time's sake, I'm going to skip that part and just show you, okay, now when I hit play, let's say we're making how to, I don't know, set the table, put the chairs around the table, or how to build a engine and put in the pieces of the engine, right? You just bring in these interactables, you give them snap zones. I probably should have made this closer to me. There we go. And there you can see when I get close to it, it lights up. And when I let go, there was no transition. My model needs some work, but it did snap into position. Now, interestingly, it thinks this point right here is the center, which is why it snaps to that location. But anyways, in the series, I kind of go through how do you position it so it looks correct and it's not like way off to the side and the wrong size. But for time's sake, just know that there's a few extra steps there. But so, yeah, that's a lot to take in at once, I know. Questions? I don't want to take up all my time just demoing and tutorializing.
Well,
I want to know what...
I was kind of wondering. There was a question a little bit ago that I held on to about the best VR headsets for development in Unity. Is there kind of ones that work better than others? I would assume that, you know, the VR, like the Vive Pro and the Rift S and like the new ones are kind of probably the best ones, but you know, where's your minimum too? Like, where's your minimum requirements?
So you can actually develop for like the Oculus Go. I mean, if you're looking to meet a price point, the problem is because it's not wired to your computer, there's a few more steps. And even the Quest, like the Ford project I was talking about earlier, we're actually going to deploy that to, and we're still going to do it just later. We're going to deploy to the Oculus Quest, which is, of course, there's no wires, there's no computer needed to run it. There's just extra steps. You can't just hit play and run it on the Quest. You have to, well, you can, but you have to have a special cable. But so the Vive, the Rift, etc. Yeah, go ahead,
Mark. Are you using SideQuest then to load it onto the Quest, or are there other ways?
So I haven't actually gone through the whole series of steps. But if you enable developer mode on your Quest, you can then export an Android APK, Android package file, and load that on. I don't think you have to use a SideQuest. You might be right, but the tutorial I watched, I don't think they used that.
Awesome. And like you said, see, the Quest is so great right now because with that link cable and Oculus Link, I mean, it almost becomes the Rift S and wire and the untethered. You have the best of both worlds. I love it. And the Go, and we'll do sessions on this too. If you're using something like CoSpaces EDU, you can develop immediately for VR in the Quest. And when you're logged into the app, for the Go, and when you're logged into the app on the Go, it, like instantly your programs, your worlds are there. Yeah. It's too amazing. It's like too easy. It's like magic.
So that's turnkey, hit play and you're on it.
Yeah. And now another, so for all the time that I've known you, Mark, the thought has always been like, wow, how great would it be to be able to really collaborate together? And we're in this absolutely unique situation right now where we can absolutely, work with both of our classes together in interesting ways. I would love to, have you back on to do some stuff. I
Yeah.
would love to invite your students for some of the sessions that we're doing that might be relevant to them.
Mhm.
I think that all of the thoughts we've had for years about how great it would be to create this like global learning community. I think we're there right now. And our goal, Mike and I, is to kind of push this forward. It's like I keep considering it the unanticipated outcome of this horrible situation is that we're all pushing the boundaries and pushing forward. And
Yeah.
so I'm just throwing that out there that
Yeah.
in any way
Serendipitous learning opportunities. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
should be a hashtag. Serendipitous learning opportunities.
It's a little long. We can workshop that though.
Yes.
I'll put
SLO?
I'll put my
No,
team
those
on
are
it.
student learning objectives. I hate
Serendipitous learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're launching some really cool stuff at Participate related to this kind of stuff directly, even that we'll keep you in the loop on. I think that's also part of what Steve's talking about. So there's a lot of cool ways that we can share not only your work but potentially work together. And there's a new games-based learning community that's launching at Participate soon. And these streams are going to be going to be soon being streamed in a couple other places as well. So there's so much going on, and there is a lot of cool opportunities.
If there's teachers that want to jump in and join with other teachers using Unity, there is a closed private Facebook group. If you go to the Unity Learn website, it's linked on there. But you can join there, and that's where a lot of the conversations around collaboration in Unity are happening.
The password is Mark Suter is awesome.
No, they changed it from more of some.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool. I'm gonna actually literally today. I do quest-based learning and all choice stuff, and my Unity stuff is a little weak, and I'm gonna literally just convert it right today to your course. I mean that VRTK course and some of the other stuff that you provided, as well as that I did add recently that 2D game making tutorial that Unity offers. I think that's really sharp for kids to get started.
Yeah, they do a really nice job with that. As far as the collaboration element goes, I want to point something out. If people are wondering, okay, if I do this, let's say Steve and I or our students are working on this and I'm done with this and I'm like, okay, your students take it from here and make this look like a chair or something like that. How do you go back and forth? Well, my answer is GitHub, which is, for those unfamiliar, it's basically a cloud-based storage of version control. So for instance, right now, actually, before we started today, I was working on my laptop and moving some things around in here. And I just pushed the changes from my laptop downstairs to GitHub. And then I came here and I pulled those changes from the cloud to my desktop where I'm sitting upstairs now. So as you can see, I made some very minor changes here. And I'll say added cube. Whoa, home row, Mark. Cube. Commit to master, and then push. So now I could have Steve's students pull those changes and they would have the most up to date. So they don't have to package the whole file, send the big file over. It's none of that.
And with GitHub then, does it always send up a new version, meaning that it doesn't destroy my version? Does it always become version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3?
So there's things called branches, which is where I only use master because I'm the only one on this project. So you might have your own branch, and then let's say you made some changes to this scene on your branch. Think of them as parallel universes, right? We're both working on it at the same time. And you do some cool things. You can do what's called a pull request, which is you saying, hey, Mark, we did some neat things. We're requesting that you pull the changes from our parallel universe project into the main master branch. So it's almost like you making suggestions. Okay, hey, pull the change in, and I can say yes or no, but with these changes. So there's a whole other element to use with that. But for the most part, if we're asynchronous, we don't have to worry about it. We just all commit to master faster. But
Yeah.
that's how GitHub is so popular, is branching.
I very much want to teach all my kids how to get started with GitHub. And one of the cool things too is Make Code Arcade. I don't know if you've used that at all, but that allows you to interface with GitHub. And it's again one of those great ways. See, it's an interesting thing because for anybody who's we did a session on it last week. We'll do more for sure. And I'm hoping maybe my wife Kathy will do a session on working with Make Code and GitHub because she's been working on that a bit. But the beauty is when you work in Make Code Arcade, everything's essentially stored in cookies and browser-based. So, I had the horrible situation of a lot of my students messaging me this week saying, "Oh, can I still work on my such and such project that I started in school?" And the answer is no. But now that we're forced to kind of think, further about all this, I think, teaching kids professional standards like GitHub is tremendous. So maybe if you're interested, we could have you on and Kathy and do something that shows, a few different environments with GitHub and all that, because I think it's really important.
I just put a link in here in the slideshow of my screencast-o-matic that I did for my students on getting started with GitHub with Unity.
Wait. Send me that. What is is it a Bitly or anything? Or
no, it's just inside.
So the Bitly for the slide.
Yeah.
deck.
So if you go here,
right. I'm gonna
all these links are here.
Again.
Yeah.
All right. I've said that before. I'll send it again.
My course as well as that.
I will give my kids that course, and that gets them. So is it specifically Unity and GitHub? Not that it should make a difference, but is that
correct? This is if you want to use GitHub with Unity, it's setting it up exactly what you're looking for. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Like I said, I also want to see kids be able to use it with these other tools. So I imagine it's the same process. It just might feel a little different, but we'll figure that all out. But I think that's tremendously important that we start, again, kind of like with what we're doing with VR and game design and, giving kids authentic opportunities. Like when they're using Unity and Unreal Engine, they're using industry standard tools. And when we then get them also using that environment like GitHub and understanding that, I mean, we're setting them up.
Yep. Right. Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mark, thank you so much. And we get to hang out with you again later today. And, so I
thought this was just a test run. Was this live?
Oh, this was so live, man. So,
awesome. Yeah, we'll see everyone else later this afternoon on the YouTube channel.
Yep. Thanks, bud.
For watching.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.